We should also mention that this is all part of an interview where you're asked a bunch of different questions about the business, including things that would increase pay-per-view numbers. And you say in this interview that that requires three things. Stronger pay-per-views requires three things. Number one, an established brand. Number two, marketing power. And number three, something you described as, quote, a publicity stunt or something that catches the mainstream appeal. And there's a follow up to that question about how TNA needs a breakout star. And you explain that breakout stars from the past, quote, weren't necessarily great wrestlers or even great talkers, but they had the it factor. They were at the right place at the right time, and it catches on. You never know what the future holds once you have that megastar. End quote. And Jarrett talked about how many people see TNA's potential megastar as Samoa Joe. And you said he's a phenomenal talent and he has the it factor. His success is yet to be determined. You can't judge a guy over a 3-month period. You've got to get behind someone and go with them, stick with them, and find out what happens. Now, that's what Jeff thought about wrestling 15 years ago. Has your opinion changed at all?
In what specific point or question? Or
breakout stars, and you got to get with a guy and stay with him. I'm not asking you to comment on Samoa Joe. I'm asking about, do you need these three things to be successful on pay-per-view? And the breakout stars, it's less about wrestling and talking and more about right time, right place. It catches on, you go with it and you stay with it.
So do I believe it now? I believe wholeheartedly. Trying to think of a good example. Social media has changed the game in developing personas. And I'm not just saying wrestling. Look at music. Taylor Swift may go down in history as the very best example, period. She really started her career on MySpace, interacting with the fans in the engagement, and started that little engine that could, and now it's a phenomenon. But 2006, 7, 8, 9, right through there. Look where social media was at during this era. It was, I can't say it's non-existent, but it was all in the startup mode. Here we are in 2023. Let me ask you, Conrad, when I did that little bit and whooped Effie's ass and debuted for GCW Wrestling on New Year's Day, take social media out of that. We wouldn't be talking about it today. I mean, the podcast is a part of the evolution of technology. But I just think that in that era, the publicity stunt, the bandwidth to do one, yes, we need to do. So I still agree with publicity stunt. I still believe in that breakout star mentality that you have to stay the course. I mean, you could go back in history. I don't care what brand, WCW, WWF, WWE, AEW, Impact. You gotta have to. Well, you just mentioned it. AJ Styles, incredible talent. He lost on the first show. We stayed with him, and he became front and center, the Grand Slam winner, and the poster child, and everything. Yes, you have to stay with the breakout star. And in those early days, you would definitely not consider AJ a great talker by any stretch. And is he an unbelievable talent? Yes. But there was a lot of really, really good X Division wrestlers. But AJ had, and I don't want to say boy next door, because I think that a little bit diminishing for his aura and his character. I just think that when he got rolling and a little bit better, and we were sticking with him. Now, I won't get into 2010, 11, 12, because he went to the Flair thing, and I think that derailed him. But the kind of the proof's in the pudding. Look what happened. I mean, boom, he went to New Japan. He kind of reblossomed again. But yes, I think you got to stick with a guy, but I also think you need to have 2 or 3 guys. You can't have an entire roster, but 2 or 3 guys that you're really focusing on and get behind. You got to do that publicity stunt. What was the third thing, Conrad?
Well, what I wanted to ask about specifically, though, is when you talked about these breakout stars that in the past, historically, they haven't all been necessarily great wrestlers or great talkers. And I think that sometimes people just sort of get lost in that. Like, I'm not saying we don't usually comment on current stuff, However, when people when people talk about best wrestler in the world these days, they often talk about just the in-ring component. Very rarely do you hear a guy like Roman Reigns named mentioned there. And I don't think anybody would say he's a bad wrestler in terms of in-ring or on the microphone. No one would say that. But when you talk about best wrestler in the world, we're usually listing guys who are fantastic bell to bell, and that's sort of their niche. But then when you go the other way, I mean, I think if you watch Collision or any AEW show in the last 2 years, you'd be hard pressed to find an act that was more over than the Acclaimed. But when people talk about the best tag teams in wrestling, they often don't list the Acclaim. But if you say the most over tag team in wrestling, well, they're probably near the top of the list. And I think there's a lesson in that. Like, even you go back to the 80s, like the reason a lot of people enjoy the income and level of notoriety they do in wrestling is because stuff was built on the back of Hulk Hogan, who most people would say maybe not the best in-ring wrestler of all time, but it's all right. It's positioning, it's story, it's right time, it's right place. I think you hit the nail on the head, but I think a lot of times the narrative online becomes, well, this guy isn't as good of a wrestler as that guy. That oftentimes doesn't matter. Like some of the best actors in the world are on off Broadway. They're not necessarily prime time on Thursday night or have a big box office smash this weekend. That doesn't matter. Like, no one would ever accuse The Rock of being the greatest actor that there ever was, but the dude's been box office for a long time, and that matters in the wrestling business. And I just think sometimes fans maybe get lost in that. Would you agree?
Oh gosh, Conrad, I'll double down. I mean, social media, we should rain on social media, but you would, it's because it's that conversation, but it's not in the same room. And in the same room, if me and you and Silva and Cassio's half awake and Corey or whatever the group may be, we would probably not too far into this conversation say, no, wait a minute. Let's get the metrics we're measuring. Let's get the barometer. Are we talking about just in-ring work? Are we talking about selling tickets? Are we talking about promo? Are we just kind of talking about his ability? He can be a heel and a baby face. He can be a tag wrestler. He can be a six-man wrestler or a trios or what. It's like, what are we measuring here? What's the barometer? What's the metrics? But this is kind of the whole set point that I think is, well, maybe this is topical. Conrad, in the six-man tag, when Karen stroked Aubrey and wiped
beat her clean.
Matt beat her clean. Prior to that, I hate to say this, but the entire match, or a good portion of it, there were two chants going on. Papa Briscoe.
Yes.
And then Aubrey. Two non-wrestlers.
Yes.
And I know this is going to, it become better coming from you because it's kind of sounds self-serving, but in the six-man tag, the stars of that in this order, number 3 was Aubrey, number 2 was Papa Briscoe, and my bride Karen was the number 1 star. But no, the 3 non-wrestlers
were the focus of the match.
Of course it was, because the mentality, and this is where I just think things get so disjointed that, I'll get back in the topic here, but look, work rate is one metric. I mean, to me, and I'm not diminishing or amplifying it, it's really one metric. And I don't want to get into the territory days, but in the business of professional wrestling, and I'll jump across to the competition, the thing that really only matters is Wall Street. The chairman and the board and all the way down to any third party at our competition. Wall Street, because you got to make a profit. And why do you got to make a profit? Because you've got a lot of folks investing their hard-earned money in an organization, and you have a fiduciary responsibility to do what's best for the brand. No more, no less. When we get into, work rate is the only thing that matters. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. That's just, it may only matter to you, and I'll pat you on the back, because if that's what you care about, God bless you. Teeny Jarrett taught me a long time ago, wrestling fans, they're there. They've all got a right to voice their opinion, and they all got a right to like what they like. And so you can't discount it. But at the end of the day, collectively, the business is all about the bottom line.